Ready? Well, welcome to the first ever Alaska statewide storytelling event. Let's just give ourselves a round of applause for that. My name is Rob Prince. I am chair of the journalism department at UAF and also host of Dark Winter Nights, True Stories from Alaska, which is the Fairbanks storytelling event. And Dark Winter Nights, just give you a little background of what we're doing up here in Fairbanks. Dark Winter Nights is a live event. It's a radio program on KUAC FM. It's a podcast on iTunes, and we try and do some weird stuff like this as well. If you'd like more information about our storytelling program, you can find it at darkwinternights.com, and again, we're on iTunes too. And we started Dark Winter Nights because we were frustrated with how Alaska is depicted in many of the popular reality TV programs. And we thought that it would be cool if Alaskans could share the real Alaska with the world. And so that's the goal of Dark Winter Nights. And I'm excited to see the state coming together to share stories with each other now, because I think the rest of the world needs to know how great the state really is, that Alaska is cool enough, we don't need to make up stuff about it. So that's sort of our origin story, if you will. Our locations this evening are the Kodiak Public Library, the Valdez Consortium Library, the Kenai Community Library, and the Juneau Public Library. How are you all doing? Just shout.
Yay!
Yeah.
You do break up a little bit, Eric, Rob, just so you know, you break up a little bit when you're talking, so I don't know if your microphone's not very close to you, but...
Okay. It is pretty close, but maybe I'll try and talk this way. Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll try not to animate so much, but I want to look at you at the same time, so I'm not really sure. I'll just talk this way. Don't take it personally, okay? All right. I want to say I'm happy to be connected with the 4 most beautiful cities in Alaska. This is pretty awesome for me. It feels sort of like being in high school and getting to sit with all the beautiful, cool kids. So thanks so much to all of you for that. This is a really neat opportunity. And I really thank you for trying this out. This is a new kind of weird thing. And so I'm excited to see you all get on board with this. What I'd like to do now is some quick introductions with all of our different locations. I'd like to know who's going to be hosting from these different locations and what, if anything, you all have going on in regard to storytelling programs. So why don't we start off with Juneau, where I believe we have Beth and Alita there. How are you all doing?
We are doing well. I'm Beth. Hello, everybody at the other places, and welcome to our audience here. I run the programs here at the Juneau Public Library, and we do have a really healthy, wonderful storytelling community in Juneau. And Alita's going to just come up real quick and tell us a little bit about mudrooms, and Pete Griffin can also tell you a little bit about Telebration. So you guys can stand right there on the X, and everyone can see you.
Where do I live?
Right there's the camera.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alita Buss. I'm one of the founding members of the Mudrooms Storyboard. We've been 5 seasons with Mudrooms doing monthly storytelling events, and it's been very successful. We have a website. It's mudrooms.org. We hold our events in downtown Juneau in a church. We usually get about 250 to 300 people coming out. We do the same model that Anchorage and Kodiak do, where it's 7 people each telling a 7-minute story. I think they have a similar thing happening in Haines too now. And so,
Great.
Thank you.
Hi folks. My name is Pete Griffin. I am the Alaska liaison for the National Storytelling Network. We have an annual Telebration event that is sponsored by the National Storytelling Network. A number of local Juneau storytellers get together and we put on an evening of free stories. Our latest was at the new Mendenhall Valley Public Library, which was well attended and very well received. We do that annually.
And that's Juneau, so we'll pass it off to the next library.
All right. Thank you very much, Juneau. Kodiak. I believe we have Katie and Brianna there.
Yes, welcome everyone. Kodiak is celebrating its new building. We are 2 years young, and the space is really Kodiak this year with a story build and tell workshop. So we're slowly increasing the number of kids who are learning storytelling regarding their own lives. And you can hear their stories on KODK, which is 90.7. Thanks to the Kodiak Public Library Association Dog-Eared Reads radio program. So the story build and tell segment is an evolving segment with that show. In addition, tonight we have about just under 20 people here for this wonderful event. And around Kodiak, similar to Juneau's Mudroom, we have a great fan base for the galley tables. And I'm happy to introduce Brianna Gibbs. She'll be our host tonight. And Brianna was instrumental in getting galley tables underway. And we have some of those storytellers with us here this evening. So Brianna.
Hi, as Katie mentioned, I'm Brianna Gibbs, and I was one of the co-founders of Galley Tables, which was actually inspired by Mudrooms in Juneau, so thank you, ladies. We have a similar format, 7 minutes. It's a monthly event, typically on the first Friday, and it's held in our local pod. And we're currently looking for new spaces because we have reached fire code capacity every seasonal event this year. So we are on the lookout for better spaces so we can better accommodate the growing audience.
Excellent. So glad to hear about your success with that. All right. Valdez, we got is Molly available there?
Yeah, I'm right here. So my name is Molly Good. I work here at the library in Valdez. We're very excited to see what this is all about, and hopefully it'll inspire something in our community.
Great. Good. And Kenai, we got Rihanna there.
Hi, this is Rihanna from the Kenai Library. I do the programming here, and we do have some storytelling events, nothing quite as fancy as y'all, but we have had Cabin Fever Reliever, where people come and tell their stories, their writings, and of course we have a local writers group as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. So before we get started tonight, I want to go over some of the guidelines. First of all, the story should be true. We certainly allow some poetic license, but let's have them at least based in truth. They should be from Alaska. They should have happened to you or someone who is no longer with us. Hopefully that wasn't by your hand. We have about a 10-minute limit we're going for right now. If you go over that, the host in your location is going to cut you off because I'm non-confrontational. I really don't want to be the one who has to do that. But if you do get much over that, I might have to break in. And if we happen to have more storytellers than we have time for, I would encourage you to connect with a storytelling program in your area if you can. And if you want to reach out to us in Dark Winter Nights, you can submit stories at darkwinternights.com as well. So if we don't get through to you tonight, we still hope to keep track of your story. And tonight's event should be recorded. So if you want to share it with others or relive it at some point, we'll be posting some information about that on our Facebook, so you can follow Dark Winter Nights on Facebook. Before we get started, I want to throw out some quick special thanks. First of all, to Artem Zhdanov, who is, how close was I on that? Zhdanov, there we go. This event was entirely his idea, and he came to me probably more than a year ago, and I just wasn't really in a place to move on it, and finally was able to make the arrangements. So this entire thing is his idea, and so I want to thank him very much for that. Also, Shane Southwick, who we presented the idea to, the OWL director, who picked up on this and got the word out. And then here in Fairbanks, I'd like to thank Melissa Harder and Chris Skidmore for helping us out with our location here. And to all of you for coming tonight, and for those of you hosting at your various locations, and to the storytellers. So, let's hear some stories. First off, Juneau, have you guys got someone to tell a story there?
We sure do. So our first storyteller tonight is a well-known community member, Katie Bosler, and I tell you what, she does not mess around when she celebrates her birthday. She pulled the birthday card for things like getting her children to move rocks around the backyard in sideways rain, and she brought her friends along for a long, hard hike in the Italian Alps. I can attest to that, and was also known as Katie's Boot Camp Birthday. But on a recent birthday weekend a few years ago, Katie and I took a really interesting Alaska road trip. We flew to Anchorage, and then we rented a sedan we called the Raspberry Roadster. We drove along Turnagain Arm, made through the one-way tunnel to Whittier, and we met up with the Alaska Marine Highway Ferry Aurora, and our destination was Valdez. So we're coming your way, Valdez. Here's Katie Bosler.
Thanks for coming, everybody here in Juneau and everybody around the state. We've been waiting for you, say the friendly, round women at the Whittier Ferry Terminal. Terminal may be a bit of a stretch. Passengers check in at a building that looks more like a double wide, waiting for us. But we're not late for our ferry. We shrug it off and pick up our pre-ordered tickets, along with a sign that we'll affix to the upper right-hand corner of the windshield. It reads, capital VLDZ for Valdez, our destination, in 5 hours down Prince William Sound. We have some time to kill before the ferry departs and head across the gravel road for a latte and a cookie at one of those small shops just opening their doors for the summer season. Not much more than a glorified vendor stand, the coffee shop looks out on a harbor filled with fishing and charter boats. It's early May, and my birthday weekend. My good friend Beth and I go big on birthdays. For her 40th, we visited quaint villages in coastal Italy. This year anniversary of my Big 5-0 party, Judy Collins, one of my favorite artists and still going strong as a touring singer, is performing in the town best known as the end of the road for the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. The next day, we'll revel in Judy's gorgeous tones in the most plush arts center in Alaska, courtesy of now long-gone oil money. Beth and I set off for our long weekend road trip in a shiny red sedan. We named her the Raspberry Roadster as soon as she was spotted in the rental garage at the Anchorage Airport. We're, name any pop culture lady duo in recent decades, Thelma and Louise, Lucy and Ethel, thrilled to be free of work and responsibility for a few days, en route to a place we've never been. We amble back to the Raspberry Roadster parked in front of the terminal. Usually passengers with the vehicle are required to line up to board well before departure time. But the chain link fence around the area where vehicles wait to load onto the ferry is still locked. Oh, say the women at the ticketing desk with those same expectant smiles. Drive up and we'll open the gate. A guy with a salt and pepper beard and wearing a reflective vest waves in the Raspberry Roadster. The loading area is 6 lanes wide, marked off by fresh white painted lines. We drive up and park in the middle as instructed. The Raspberry Roadster is alone. There are no other vehicles in sight. Where are the trucks carrying supplies for summer construction projects? The retired travelers and their unwieldy homes on wheels bearing out-of-state license plates. The weekend warriors with their fishing or ski gear. Our Alaska Marine Highway vessel is tied up at the modest dock before us. The 235-foot-long Aurora looks sharp, painted nautical navy with a bright white smokestack, awaiting her imminent voyage. Beth rolls the Roadster down the steel ramp onto the holding area below decks. It's largely empty, except for our rental sedan. The ferry engines rumble and echo through the cavernous hold. 4 crew members direct the parking of our one vehicle amidst the emptiness. Beth and I huff up the stairs to the solarium, the outdoor area on the top deck, where ferry passengers set up mini campsites for the journey. On long rides, they'll even pitch tents. Usually there are fewer chairs than people, and we instinctively grab a couple of plastic Adirondack chairs. Then it dawns on us. We don't have to grab anything. There's no competition. It's the first week of May, and we guess most tourists haven't shown up yet. I seize the moment. I can sit anywhere I please on this ferry deck. I settle into the plastic chair, tilt my head back to the spring sun, close my eyes and bask in it, feeling like a grande dame on a steamer 100 years ago. The ferry disembarks. Soon the rumble of engines is replaced by the steady sound of the ship's streaming wake. The strange hamlet of Whittier gradually disappears. The sun is high, the water blue, and the mountains on the horizon white. Within the hour, wind shivers through the solarium. It's 2:30, and we haven't had any lunch. We amble downstairs to the cafeteria. The galleys on these aging Alaska Marine Highway boats are like diners on the sea, all chrome, with red leather seats and faw marble tabletops, the smell of overcooked green beans in the air. A 20-something crew member blocks the door to the cafeteria. Dirty blonde hair sticks out straight from his head as if in a messy fight with itself. Tattoos along his arms extend to his hands. He's wearing a worn T-shirt and long, shiny black shorts. Never one to hesitate. Beth walks right up to him. "Can we get lunch?" He seems confused by the question. "I don't know," he says. "I just woke up." We get the sense we've barged into this guy's house, but he works here. We manage to order a few snacks from a friendly chap wearing a hairnet. We head to the bow and look out at the sparkly azure water. I'm admiring a gold bell engraved Aurora in 1976 when a loud, deep voice booms over the ship's PA system. "I understand we have a birthday on board." Beth gives me a sly smile and points to the bridge. "Look, there's someone waving at us." She smiles, feigning surprise. Soon a gentleman with silver hair and a matching mustache on a slightly creased face saunters up to us. He's wearing gray sweatpants and a windbreaker. The gentleman sticks out his hand. "I'm Captain Bob," he says, worn eyes crinkling through black frame glasses. "How about a birthday tour of the bridge?" Well, of course we want to see the bridge. The Alaska Marine Highway is key to public transportation in many parts of Alaska. Captain Bob's offer is like an invitation to see the control panel in the steering nook of a commuter train. The captain shows us through a hallway of doors to the usually closed to passengers area. "Shh," he whispers. "There may be crew sleeping here." I think of the groggy dude in the shiny shorts with the unkempt hair as we walk up the narrow staircase. Captain Bob opens the door to Aurora's navigation central. With a sweep of his arm, he shows off the dozen compasses on the bridge, all synced with the same gyroscope, he explains. And with all this modern technology, the ship can steer itself, with crew monitoring, of course, but I prefer to steer manually. Captain Bob has a member of his crew demonstrate the manual technique. Left 3, right 4, midships, he calls, pointing directions while the crew member steers. Then the captain turns to us with a smile. "Why don't you ladies come back in a couple of hours for the full tour? Maybe you can even take the helm for a bit." Beth and I look at each other with "OMG, I can't believe this is happening" faces. That'll be a while. So we visit the observation lounge, rows and rows of empty seats, looking out on shiny salt water, snowy mountains on the horizon. A lone fishing boat skims by, making the slightest wake. We meet Maria, a seasoned crew member with long red hair. She confirms the obvious. We are the only passengers on this boat. "How could this happen?" I ask. "It's the first day of the summer schedule," she shrugs, "and the fast ferry with the passengers left this morning." Then our sleepy friend from the cafeteria pipes up. "We have people and a load of cargo to pick up in Valdez," he says. Beth and I figure we each have a load of crew at our service for the journey. But this is the Alaska Marine Highway, not the Love Boat. His apparent supervisor, with a knowing face, walks in, wearing a uniform with bars on his sleeves. "Derek," he says. "Yeah, I'll be there soon," Derek sighs, looking at us. "I'm really just a glorified parking attendant," he laments. On a normal ferry ride, you make small talk with tourists or catch up with friends and acquaintances that happen to be on the same boat. This is an entirely different experience. A cast of Only on the Alaska Marine Highway characters is unfolding before us. We're edging on bonds that can only occur in this highly unusual situation. Beth and I are back in the galley, picking at an overcooked salmon dinner, when a handsome young man with a clean-cut look of a TV newscaster appears. "Hi, I'm Mike. Captain Bob's first mate," he says. "Captain Bob is ready for you." Mike escorts us back to the bridge. This time, Navigation Central seems more like the set on a James Bond movie or the Starship Enterprise. At least a half dozen crew members man various pieces of digital navigation equipment topped by computer monitors. A few hours ago, I somehow didn't notice the high captain's chairs on either side of the space. A bank of windows looks out on Prince William Sound, the water covered with the remnants of a calving Columbia glacier, hundreds of mini icebergs, ice biscuits on a blue baking sheet. In the middle of it all is Captain Bob steering the ship, manually. Left 3, midship, right 3. He directs like a symphony conductor, a crew member's hands on the wheel. The captain's appearance is a far cry from the casual sweats Friday of a few hours ago. He's fresh painted like the ferry, wearing a full uniform, crisp white shirt, gold bars on his shoulders. Then he invites Beth to give it a go, steering the ship, that is. Beth jumps at the chance and does a fine job as one of Captain Bob's crew calls out commands. While Beth is steering, I get a crash geography lesson from Mike. He shows me a large navigational map under a glass on a side table. The Columbia Glacier is the biggest tidewater glacier in Prince William Sound, he says, and it's one of the fastest retreating glaciers in the world. Mike points out that we're 6.85 miles east of Bligh Reef, where in 1989 another captain, this one under the influence, and I imagine not nearly as dapper as Captain Bob, ran aground on Bligh Reef and set off the Exxon Valdez oil spill. That must have been about the time Mike was born. The irony of this situation is staggering. Here we are, the only passengers on a vessel meant to carry 250, and Beth is steering the ship. None of this seems to register with Captain Bob. I get the idea that this is one of his last hurrahs as he rolls towards retirement, and a chance to show a couple of middle-aged ladies what an Alaska Marine highwayman can do on my only in Alaska birthday cruise.
All right, thank you very much. I hope you all take a flight on a 747 to Paris sometime. That would be interesting to see how that, maybe they'll let you fly that too. All right, so let's see, that was Juneau. Kodiak, have you got a story for us?
All right, we do. So we are about to introduce Mr. Terry Haynes, a man who needs no introduction, and his story, How We Ran from the Ice and Found Out Faster is Slower. So please welcome Terry Haynes.
And thanks, folks around Alaska. I hope I don't get too lost on this one. This is about a time that we were crab fishing, and I have to apologize right off the bat because I've never seen The Deadliest Catch. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to be reinforcing stereotypes or not. Probably so, I'm afraid. But it was a long time ago. It was before rationalization. It was when it was wide open and you just went out there and fished crab as fast as you could because there was only one big pile of crab and everyone was trying to get it at the same time. I'd say it was in the 70s or the 90s, one of the odd decades. But it was the time that I remember it was the darkest winter of my life. I'll never forget it because we were fishing way up north. Sometimes the whole fleet goes way up above St. Paul. And the crab will be all up there and everyone's fishing like crazy. But you're so far north that it's just dark all the time. It's just always dark. And then everything is gray. Everything is gray. It didn't help that we were on a gray and white boat. And the ocean's gray. You're way beyond blue or even green seas. The ocean is just gray out there. And then the air is gray. It's just this gray mist that you can see about 5 feet away from the boat. And the sky is gray. Everything is gray. That you look up far enough and it's just black. It's just blackness. I don't think we saw a star the whole time. Never saw the moon the whole time we were there. And sometimes when you're offshore like that, it seems like you're out in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around you. But in this case, this was really true. There was nothing around us. Other boats were there, but other than that, I mean, St. Paul is the most remote island in North America because it's the only island there. If you're there, that is it. That is the island that is even in existence there. So we were up there grinding away. Luckily, it was pretty good crab fishing. So we were pulling pots up and down, filling up, and we were fishing on a 4-man deck, which is pretty typical. And the 3 of those guys, I'll never forget. Me, hopefully I won't forget me, maybe later. But Big Mike, lifelong friend. Rodney, who I haven't seen in 25 years, but I'll never forget Rodney, the stuff we went through. And the guy who I can't even remember his name or his face. I can't remember anything about him, even though we fished together for a month or 2. But I always remember him as Rodney Dangerfield. Because as the fishing began to slow down, and it got to be less and less, and you're still working just as hard or harder because you're moving your pots all around trying to find the crab again. And Rodney Dangerfield got sort of sadder, and finally we went into the delivery of St. Paul, and he did this thing just like Rodney Dangerfield did in Caddyshack. He said, "Hey, my arm, it's broken." and he goes, "Oh, yeah, sure, just as we're pulling into town, oh, I really can't work anymore, you guys. You're going to have to get somebody to take my place." And it's a culture, it's a fisherman culture there. Because every fisherman out there, you'll keep fishing if, like, the bones are sticking out a little bit. That's all right, this is fine, I'm good. Or if, your arm's off, that's okay, I'll get it at the end of the string. Let's keep going, And it's just, that kind of a culture you would never say. Of course, on the other hand, a fisherman will complain about the smallest, most insignificant little thing. Brother, you drank the coffee before it's done brewing? I have seen fights over who drank the coffee. But I would never complain, about, most of your foot's still attached. That's okay, I'll put the boat, we can finish the season like this. So at the same time, you would never question someone who's obviously faking it. It really badly hurt me. All right, I guess. And so we got to St. Paul, and sure enough, boom, Rodney Dangerfield was gone. And there's nobody in St. Paul, in general, to take anybody's place. And you got to go right back out. You deliver your crab, and you got to go right back out. So we have a 3-man deck. And a 3-man deckhand is a lot different animal than a 4-man deckhand. 4-man deckhand walks around with coffee in his hand. He's working hard, but he's doing his thing. He has a 3-man deckhand never gets above a crouch. He never gets above like this. He's a desperate crab sailing around on deck. He never quite gets all his work done in time. And there's just these 3 guys shooting around on deck. And of course we stacked all the time. I was a stack man, so I had to, at the time, I have a vertical leap of about 2 inches now. But at the time, I could leap 17 feet straight in the air. Well, are these supposed to be true stories? 16 and a half feet straight into the air I could leap, because I had to. You had to be able to jump, you had to be able to land the pot, open the door, throw the things out, get it ready, and then jump up, grab the top part, leap up on the staff before the crane man came around and crushed it. Because if you're not there in time, it's his job to crush you if you're too slow. So we ran around like that. We weren't making a heck of a lot of money either. Every time we came into St. Paul, we thought maybe there would be another crew waiting there for us. And there never was. And finally, we go through weeks, and we're all kind of haggard, these haggard creatures. You get so tired. You could sleep at any time. You could just stand like this and sleep. And we all had this pile of garbage in the forepeak that was our special pile of garbage that we would just go in whenever we got a few minutes. Everyone would run inside, and we'd just lay on our garbage and fall asleep. And then as soon as we heard the motor go down, everyone would jump up again and get back out and run into each other a couple times, and then go out and run here again. Finally, we get into St. Paul, and there's a crewman waiting for us. We heard all on the way in. Oh, we got a guy. Guy's waiting for you at the dock. But, oh boy, there's a guy waiting for us. Oh, man, we were so happy. And we pull in there, and there's a guy. There's only one guy on the dock. He's standing there, big, tall fella, and he's just standing there, not moving. And we're pulling up to the dock for like good 45 minutes, and he hasn't moved the whole time. And I thought, they've killed the guy. They probably dropped him off at a taxi. He's just been standing there all night, frozen to death. And that man did not move until we pulled up and tied up. And he went down, got his bag, got on the boat, and that's when we first met Spider. And, Spider, I think they found him in probably B&B's finest. I believe they got him packed up on the plane and out of there before he had any idea where he was going. But he didn't complain about it. He realized that he'd been fairly shanghaied. And he looked around at us and said, "Well, boys, we're not making any money, are we?" Or Spider, we are not. I said, "Well, I guess I'm here anyway, aren't I?" "Yes, Spider, you are." All right. So we get out there and start running here. And sure enough, Spider is not the fastest guy. And we're three deckhands. We're zipping around like this. Like, come on, Spider, come on, let's go. Get going, Spider, let's go faster. They're like, oh, no, you guys. Yeah. You guys understand. Slower is faster. Spider, that's the stupidest thing I've heard in my life. Faster is faster. Slower is slower. Come on. And me and Rodney and Big Mike were zooming around. And Spider is one of those crazy guys, too. He would just show up just in time with the bait jar bait. Just in time. He would, just show up, just ramble up, just as the puff swinging the board, grab it and land it. He was just that guy. He was the guy who would have his cup of coffee and drive everyone else crazy because he said somewhere where it's obviously going to fall over and wander away and come back just as it's falling off the thing and grab it. And that was a Spider in a nutshell. He's like, well, what can you say about Spider? We're trying to get him to do things like fill up a whole bunch of bait jars at once so we get ahead. It's like, oh, no, boys, that's just dumb. And sure enough, we fill them up ahead of time, and then I didn't use them, have to unfill them. Anyway, we made do with Spider. And then one day we got the news that the ice was coming down. Well, it's bad enough that we're up there not really catching much crab, but once the ice comes down, I think a lot of people think of that ice up there as like a big, uniform sort of a sheet of ice. It is, in fact, a rabble of ice that's kind of wandering around up there, wondering where to go, and all of a sudden it'll just take off in your direction. The wind will start blowing, and off it comes, and there it is. We show up at our gear to move it, and it's just got these huge, ghostly ice things around it that look like these big salt licks. If you've ever seen them, sometimes where there's cow country, they have these art things where the cows lick the salt in these weird shapes. And the ice will all be these odd, strange shapes banging around in the boat. And we're trying to find our pots, just barely getting them out in between the ice. We stack the stack, and we run down as fast as we can, which isn't very fast. Take all the pots off the boat, run back up, and the ice has come back down on the gear that we've left there. So we stack it all up, run back down again, come back to the ones we dropped away from the ice before. The ice is there again. And so we ran away from the ice for about 2 weeks. We finally got so far down that there was no more ice, and we were just about to touch harbor by that time. The season was just about over. And we realized that Spider hadn't made a dime the whole time, too, I swear. But he was pretty mellow. He was pretty cool about it. And we're on our way into the last trip. And the skipper was ready to get to town. He was probably pushing the engine a little too hard. He later claimed that the engine was rated for that RPM. But it was, well, Rodney gets me up in the middle of the night one night, and he says, Terry. He said, no, Rodney, it's not my wheel watch, no, the boat's on fire. And there are certain things that you don't have to shout, just get you right up. One of the things is, the boat's on fire. Whoa, what? Next thing I see is him running down the hallway. It's like, and I follow him down there, open the engine room door, and this black smoke comes barreling out of there. And, oh my God, the boat's on fire. And so I go down to get the fire extinguisher to the end of the hallway, and I swear the whole time, it feels like I'm just running through molasses. I can't get to that fire extinguisher fast enough. I think, come on, what's wrong with me? I can't get there. And finally, I grab the darn thing, and I'm holding the pin. I turn around, and I'm like, oh, I got to help Rodney, come on. And the Big Mike told me later, he said, he saw me go by, and it looked to me like I was going so slow. And I get down to the engine room, and somehow we had knocked the entire bottom of the engine out. The fuel line is just sort of spraying fuel all around the area. And there it is. The sun that we had been waiting for all season was just flaming there under that engine. Rodney had gotten to the other side of it, and we had this fire extinguisher vainly trying to put the thing out. I got mine in there and just stuck it in there in between the two of us. Coming from both sides, we got it to go out. Burned up the electrical panel and everything. But I looked at Rodney and thought, there it was, right? There's the bright sun we were waiting for the whole time. We get back out on deck, we're limping into the Dutch Harbor on one engine, and we looked at each other and looked like raccoons. It's funny, that's really true. I think it's because you squint when you're down there. The whole rest of our face was black, and there's these two kind of circles around our eyes. We're looking at each other like, what the heck, right? And Spider's out there smoking a cigarette, and he goes, yep, boys, slower is faster.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Kodiak. Valdez, have you got a story for us?
Nope, we don't.
Oh, my goodness. Nothing. Okay. How about Kenai?
Yes, we do. I would like
All
to
right.
Brad Ames. Go for it.
Good evening. My name's Brad Ames.
Can I see him? Can you see him?
We can't see.
I can see the top of his head.
Maybe he needs to move over.
There we go. That'll do.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Brad Ames. It seems to be an evening for sea stories. This is an incident that occurred to me many, many years ago, and it's still really strong in my mind. The days kind of fell into one another. Twice a week or so, a seagoing tug out of Seattle would arrive with a train barge full of rail cars. It was the freight lifeline to Alaska. 3 harbor tugs worked the port of Whittier in the winter of 1976. When the heavily laden barges would arrive, we would hustle out and help the bigger tugs make up the load to the dock face. Soon the railroad crews would arrive, and after we had stripped off the lashing gear, they would offload and reload a string of empty cars. We worked nonstop until everything was relashed. Then we'd fall exhausted into bed and wait for another one. We were young. Late one evening, we received a call that the tug Sioux was having some trouble off of Cape Yakataga. Details were sketchy, but it seemed they had lost one of their barges in a storm, and after having pursued it for hours, had managed to get an emergency line on a quarter bit of the errant barge, and since it wouldn't pull straight, were only just able to keep it off of the rocky headland shore. Making no headway, they were holding on until help could be sent. The heavy storm that had gotten them into trouble in the first place seemed to be passing by in the Gulf of Alaska, but it often takes days for the weather to lay down. As we were the largest of the harbor tugs in Whittier at the time, we were ordered out to lend assistance as quickly as possible. As soon as the crew could be rounded up, we topped off our fuel tanks, and the tug George S., a Crowley tug out of Seattle, based in Whittier, plunged off into another cold winter night. As we threaded our way through Prince William Sound, we prepared for heavy weather. The captain was well seasoned, but most of the crew, including myself, had become spoiled in the calm confines of Safe Harbor. We began to pick up a building swell as we approached Hinchinbrook entrance and plodded on into the Gulf. Soon everyone but the captain began to feel the effects, and lots of time was spent bent over the great porcelain throne. 2 of our crew were almost completely incapacitated with sickness, but I've always been fortunate in that once I clear my system and don't eat anymore, I may be fairly miserable, but I'm still able to work. We fought our way through that night and the following day. You couldn't prove to me that the storm was abating as huge swells crashed over the bow and slammed into the wheelhouse windows. There is a peculiarly totally dependent feeling that comes with being at the mercy of the sea. You begin to feel as one with your ship. Your very life depends on the old steel hull and the throbbing engines beneath your feet. The further you go, the more confident you become. As your attitude begins to change to one of let her blow, we can handle it. We arrived in the evening, well after dark. We'd picked up the other craft on our radar, but they were so close to the beach that they were blended with the swells and the general color on the radar. Now we could see the lights as they crested and then plunged out of sight. We had laid out a plan to put one deckhand on the barge where he would pull up our tow line bridles and then cast off the other tug's emergency line. The idea was that as soon as we had control of the barge, our captain would swing in and pick him up. Him was me. As the seas were running at something like 20 feet, and I had seen how difficult this maneuver was going to be under the best of conditions, I packed an emergency kit with blankets, flashlight, water, and a handheld radio. I was trussed up like a Christmas turkey with heavy coveralls, a full slicker suit, and a huge orange life vest as we crept out onto the front of the bucking tug. The mate tied a flashlight to my life jacket and gave me an endless list of helpful advice. As we approached the barge, it was apparent that this was going to be a little tricky. Holding on to the gunnels, we made it out to the bow, the spotlight shining down on our backs. One minute, we were looking down on the deck of the cluttered barge, and the next we were looking up at a flat, solid wall of steel. The captain eased us into position, holding us as close as he could. I lost myself. Holding as close as he could without touching. The gunwale was a little too high to step over, so having the mate and one other hand support me from the back, I stood up on the gunwale with the bullnose between my knees. I was handed my sea bag of provisions. As soon as we were above the deck, I threw the pack into the darkness. The nature of this business is necessarily risky, and ordinarily up to this point at the discretion of the risker on when to commit. I felt the gnarled hand of the mate locked onto my coveralls at my back tense up as if he was going to help me with a push. I'm sure I must have yelled unnecessarily loudly as he eased off some. "I'll tell you when," I hollered, "and then just let go. Don't push." As we were going up for about 5 feet above the barge's deck at the peak, and then falling away so rapidly, it didn't look at all good to me. Suddenly, everything clicked. The bow of the tug was dead even with the deck. "Now," I hollered as I stepped off, neat as you please. Where just a microsecond ago were all those helping hands and the security of the George S. below me, there was now a hollow space. As the light went away and plunged into darkness, I was now standing on a 6-inch wide deck holding onto a cable handrail from the outside. Clambering inboard, I dug out my flashlight. The tug had quickly pulled away, and the lights were heading around to the bow of the barge. Cloaked in inky blackness, I found my bag and began picking my way through the deck cargo. There were several pieces of earth-moving equipment and a rock crusher right in the center. Chains and turnbuckles ran everywhere like a spider's web. Soon I came on a row of container vans. Flashing my light over the doors, I took note that they were all sealed with official-looking locking tags. After retrieving the radio from the bag, I stacked it by one of the containers and made my way to the bow. The captain's voice came booming in over the radio as he talked me through what he wanted to do. He would start on the starboard side and swing his stern across as I was thrown a light line tied to a bridle leg. As soon as I was able to pull up the hawser, I was to drag it over the cleat on that side, then hustle and hook up the other side the same way. It seemed pretty simple until I got out on the edge of the square bow. There was so much deck gear and obstacles that hustle didn't seem like the proper word. The first line went smooth. I was inspired and practically jerked the mate off his feet as I yarded the line up and onto the cleat. Then doing a crouch crawl with the backlights of the boat blinding me and the flashlight clamped in my teeth, I timed the swells as I lurched the width of the barge. When the captain saw how much trouble I was having, he slowed down his swinging, and just as I reached the port side, the heaving line came over the edge. Again inspired, I soon had it in place. My heart was racing with the effort and the adrenaline. I found a place out of the wind and sat for a few minutes. Soon the radio crackled to life again, asking me if I thought I could get the other tug's emergency line off. Okay, I muttered to myself. One thing at a time. You bet, Cap, just as soon as I can find it, I replied. 10 minutes or so later, I dropped to my knees beside the quarter bit. The backlights of the Sioux, the tug Sioux, were shining in my eyes. I could just make out a couple of figures on the deck. My heart sank when I realized that the soft line leading away into the darkness had a 10 or 12-foot cable leader on it. The wire eye was tight against the cleat. The captain of the Sioux had me in sight, so came on the radio and asked how it looked. Impossible, I thought, as I had figured on cutting the line with a freshly sharpened knife. Standby one, I answered in the radio. I watched the wire eye closely for 5 minutes or so. Every couple of minutes, the eye would slacken a little, but I was afraid to stick my hands in there. Think, don't do anything stupid. You're a long way from help. A little light bulb went off in my head. I needed a small piece of 9-thread line. Not any bigger than a jump rope would do. Again, asking the captain to stand by, I headed back to the bow to retrieve one of the heaving lines. Returning, I passed one end through the cable eye and tied a loop. Grabbing the loop in both hands, I waited for the right swell to loosen it. I could feel it loosen, but not quite enough. Suddenly, the loop just jumped forward. I picked straight up as the line snapped back and over the ear of the cleat. I let go, and it disappeared into the sea. Grabbing the radio, I called, "She's all yours, Cap. Have a good trip." "I owe you a case of beer," crackled back the reply. "Pull up alongside and I'll take it right now," I answered. You wish, he laughed. "You be careful," he added. He didn't know that Cautious is my middle name. I wasn't at all looking forward to trying to board that bouncing tug. Soon that decision was made for me when the captain called and suggested I tried to find a dry place to hang out. He feared trying to get alongside again was just too risky. I breathed a sigh of relief. Besides the risk, the barge was much more comfortable to ride on. Arriving back at the container van, I wasted no time in ripping off the seal and popping the doors. The van was empty and dry. After spreading out a few blankets, I fell into an exhausted sleep. 20-some hours later, we sailed into the calm waters of Port Etches. I could hear the deck winch start up as they began to shorten the tow. I packed my bag and worked my way up to the bow. Soon an extension ladder was set up, and I scurried down. The cook had prepared me 2 T-bone steaks that I devoured like a hungry wolf. "I bet you're exhausted," declared the mate. "We'll cover your watch. Why don't you go get you a shower and hit the sack?" I was just going to tell him about my 16-hour nap when it occurred to me what a good idea that was. That bunk never felt any better.
Thank you very much for that. Makes me wonder what you do for 3 T-bone steaks. I wonder. All right, we've got a storyteller here in Fairbanks, Eric Stevens. Come on up.
Come. Thank you. So that is the microphone.
That is
okay.
With the light on.
Test 1, 2. Groovy. All right, so I just start talking?
That's it.
Oh, man. So the story has a name, I guess. We name things. How about our 2nd anniversary? We'll call this story. So we live in Alaska. This is a good thing. There's adventures right out the door. And my wife and I, not that we were into extreme sports or anything, but we did like to get out, especially in the wintertime, for ski trips, backcountry skiing. You can cross-country ski out to cabins all around Fairbanks. And one place you can go is Tolovana Hot Springs. And so for our 2nd anniversary, in the middle of December 2003, we say, let's go out there for a night. Ski out, stay in one of the cabins, come back. Okay. It's an 11-mile trail or thereabouts. And it's kind of a hard 11 miles because there's a lot of up and a lot of down, and there's some windy areas out there too where blowing snow is a problem and such. And it's about 2 hours away from Fairbanks up on the Elliott Highway. And so you drive out there, and it's December, and you don't have a lot of daylight. The classic Fairbanks mistake is you take too long getting out of your house. And then by the time you actually drive out there, and you have to stop at Hilltop for a pie, and by the time you get to the trailhead, and trailhead is an overground word, there's this wide spot on the Elliott Highway, and people just park their cars there, this wide spot in the road, and it's always windy up there, and you put your car there, and you strap your skis on or get your snow machine or whatever your mode is, and you head on down the trail. And the classic mistake is you get there just as the sun's going down, in December and such. But my wife and I are of German descent, and when we, we're getting up at 5 a.m., and we're going to make this happen. And so we got to the trailhead just as it's getting light. Everything's working out great. And we parked the trusty blue Subaru, my wife's old Subaru. Subarus are great. They're almost indestructible. They're hardy. They're good for Alaska. And it was me and Deanne, my spouse, and our dog, Grits, the cow dog. It was a sled dog, orphan, white, but had some black cow spots on his side. Great guy, and dogs love to have fun, too, go on these adventures. So we have the skis, and then you tie this thing around your waist, and it goes back to this sled behind you. It's if you go to Fred Meyer and buy it, it's called the sled, but if you go to Beaver Sports and buy it, it's called a pulk. And so that's a more precise piece of gear. And you have your sleeping bag and your food and everything in there. And then you're not wearing a big, heavy backpack as you're skiing. So out we go. Oh, boy, this is going to be fun. And the first thing right off the parking area is a descent, and we ski on down. It's kind of tight, and maybe you fall down, but that's all right. And out we went, and we got 11 miles to the Tolovana Hot Springs. And if you've been there, it's pretty fun out there. It's rustic. When you get a cabin, that's what you get, is a cabin. There's no electricity. There's no running water. There is a flat place that is a bunk, and you brought your sleeping bag and your pad. There might be a closed-cell foam pad there from indeterminate origin. You can sleep on that, too, if you want. But it's just a very rustic cabin. And then there's the hot tubs, though. There's natural hot springs right out there, so we got down there. This is great. Unpack the pulks, get everything laid out. Sleeping bags are all right. Everything's good. Things are working. Let's go into the hot tubs for a quick soak. So we did that. The dog is running around. Come back to the cabin. Time for dinner. And one of my great indulgent lazinesses of my life is that Deanne likes to cook, and she's really good at it. And it's, I scoop up the dog yard, and I do the dishes, and I do my stuff too, but she cooks. And boy, she said, well, we're going to have anniversary dinner, and it's going to be steak, and she whips that up. We had a bottle of champagne. This is going to be great. And we're sitting there with our little headlamps on and the little white gas lantern going. And then in a cabin, you never know what's going to be there. It might be, there's on the shelf by the little window, there might be some salt, pepper, maybe a roll of toilet paper, useful things like that. And when we got to this cabin, there was also half of a little bottle of A1 steak sauce. Well, guess who brought steak? We did. This is perfect. This is, serendipity. Deanne sees the steak sauce. How would you like? You want some of this? This is great. Steak sauce on your steak. And I said, no, thanks. I'm not. I just like it, straight steak, like the Constitution says, And so she goes, okay, and she has some of that, and this is great. A bottle of champagne, one more time in the hot tubs, and went to bed. Next morning, get up, we're going to head out. And I'm up, and I'm a morning person, and this is great, and getting all organized. I got some instant oatmeal for breakfast and all this, and I go outside to wax up the cross-country skis, get things squared away. And this was our second anniversary. And by the second anniversary in your marriage, you've gone from the I love you stage to the I love you anyway stage to some degree. Things are still pretty good, but but we're getting to know each other, and maybe you learn when to say things or when not to say things. Well, this morning, Deanne chose not to say to me that maybe that A1 steak sauce was a mistake because she didn't feel real good, and after eating oatmeal, without my knowledge, and I'm pretty oblivious most of the time, But she stealthily got to the outhouse to discreetly undo breakfast there. And she didn't tell me that. And I say, are we ready to go? And she says, yeah, let's go. Okay. And so we strap on the pulks and we start skiing. And we go, and it's 11 miles back to the car. And not necessarily a friendly 11 miles all the way. And we go, and there's this one rise up the hill. And then you get to this bald spot on top. And it's always windy up there. And I've learned in the outdoors that you should drink water before you're thirsty. You should eat food before you're hungry, because you do not want to crash. You don't want to fall down energetically, and then you're playing catch up. And the weather when we were out there was not the worst, but it wasn't the best either. It was maybe around 0 or so, maybe a little below 0. But see, as is often the case, there was this northeast wind of maybe 15 gusts, 25 miles an hour. It's higher in some spots on the trail. And we got just through one of these windy, cold areas. We got out of that, went down a little bit, and I said, okay, we should eat a snack. Deanna says, I'm not hungry. Well, that's exactly when you're supposed to eat. So here you go, just eat. We got some M&Ms or something. And she went, no, I'm not hungry. I went, okay. I eat M&Ms and then had some water. You want some water? And she goes, well, I don't. You drink some water. Come on. And so she drinks some water, hands the water bottle back to me, looks at me. Eyes get big. She turns black. It's gone. And I said, what's going on? Oh, that's bad. And she says, oh, I'm sick. Now she tells me, we're 3 miles into the 11-mile trail. And you're sick? Yeah, I puked this morning. I don't feel good. I haven't been able to keep anything down. And I'm cold and I want to rest. And we're out in the middle of there is no rest. And I say, and I'm just thinking, boy, if you stop, you'll get cold. And then this is bad. We got to keep moving. Keep on moving. 1 foot in front of the other. Go, go, go. Okay. So she goes, and it just gets more tired. And I'm behind Deanne now because I don't want to get in front of her because I'll lose track of her because I get lost in my own world. And then I'll look back and she's gone or something. So I'm behind and she's just kind of shuffling along and I'm pushing her. So let's go. Come on. Keep going. Keep on moving. Let's go. Trail's not getting any shorter. Come on. And okay. I want to stop and rest. No, can't. We'll rest when we get to the car. Car's going to be great. Oh, okay. And I'm pushing her along. And at one point, I pushed her, and she stopped. Whoa. And kind of like that. And she turned around and said, stop pushing me. I went around. Okay. But you're going to die. And okay. And we got down to the bottom of this trail. And there's one last big hill to get to the car. The biggest of the hills. And came up with this brilliant idea. Deanne, just unhitch your pulk. Leave that here. We'll get you up to the car, start the car, you and the dog sit in the car, get all warm, and then I'll come down in hero mode and get your pulk and come back, and then it'll be great. Okay, so we leave her stuff there out on the trail. We're going up the hill. We get there. We get up to the hill, and I'm thinking this whole time as we're climbing this hill, first of all, we've got to get up the hill, and then the power of prayer. Please, ancient blue Subaru wagon, start when we get there, because there's no guarantee. And you don't plug your car in there. And we get up to the car, and it's windier and everything up there, and there's drifting snow and blowing snow, and there's drifts on one side of the car like it is. When we get there, we clear the snow away, get in, put the key in the car, come on. And it starts. Woo! Car starts. All right, Deanne in the car. Deanne's in the car. Dog in the car. Okay, he's in there. Cow dog in the car. And I drop my pulk there, and I say, I will be right back. Damsel in distress. Everything's working wonderfully. And I bomb down that hill, and I get her pulk, and I strap that on, and I'm going back up. And I think, this is great. Boy, this could have been bad. But we dodged it, because Deanne wasn't going to last much longer. And we get back. I get back to the car. I come up. Except there is no car. I am at that wide spot on the Elliott Highway. There's my pulk laying there. I've got Deanne's room, and there's no car. And I don't know why, but even though this is not a mystery, I mean, I've seen everything there is to see. I still turn around a couple times thinking, where's the Subaru? It's gone. And well, what happened? And I thought, well, you know what? She is pretty sick. And she's dehydrated, and maybe she's not thinking right. And she might be happily driving back to Fairbanks, even talking to me in the car, in her own mind. That's possibility number one. And I think, well, you know, another possibility. We have been married for 2 years now. She might have thought, after I went down the hill to get her pulk, she might have thought, you know what? Screw him. It's just not working out. And he's pushing me all the time. And we gave it a try. We gave it 2 years, but, you know, this way it'll look like an accident. Not Mother Nature. I was delusional. And so now, whatever the reason is, I'm out here and I'm going to die. And so I came up with the idea of the 2 pulk clam thing. Got 2 sleeping bags, got a pulk. I'm going to lay down in one pulk, pull the other pulk over me like a clam, aimed, and I'm arranging all this so that I can open up the clam and look at the road. When the next truck, you know, in a day or two, when the next vehicle goes by, I'll spring out of the clamshell and go, help, help, help. And I'm getting this all set up, and I'm climbing in there, and then sure enough, there's lights over the hill toward Fairbanks coming my way. I go, all right, this is good. Now I'm going to flag this car down. I'll be earnest without looking like a maniac, you know, so they'll pick me up. And the car comes, and it's slowing down. This is awesome. And sure enough, well, it's a blue Subaru wagon, and there's Deanne. And there, I'm so glad to see you. Are you glad to see me? And she said, yeah, well, you know, it was so windy up here with the car just idling like this. It wasn't getting any warmer. So I had to work the engine. So I just went down the road, you know, 20 miles and came back to warm up the engine. I thought, well, that's a very reasonable solution. I would have done that too. And we threw all the gear in the car, and I got to drive home while Deanne was dry heaving into a Ziploc bag. And we got close enough to town to hear KUAC radio, and it was Alaska News Nightly, so it was like 6:30, I guess, Fairbanks time. And there's Senator Ted Stevens on the radio saying, you know, I always thought we'd get him, but I never thought we'd get him alive. And he was talking about Saddam Hussein. He was pulled out of that spider hole that very day. That was the day that this all happened, December 15th, 2003. And that concludes our second anniversary story. Sorry, I went a little long there.
No, it's great. Thank you very much. All right, thank you, Eric. And I'm sure there are a lot of us who are going to run home and throw their A1 in the refrigerator because they didn't realize that had to be refrigerated. Okay. Juno, you got another one for us?
We sure do.
All right.
Eric is going to be our next storyteller. Eric has only been in Juneau a few years, but after moving around for the last 7, he says now Juneau feels like home. After starting a business, his adventures have lessened in length and planning, but they've increased in quantity and haphazardness. So welcome, Eric Orvasky.
Hello, everybody out there in Alaska. So when I sat down for lunch with a friend of mine in Montana, I asked him what he had done for the last summer, and he told me that he had been up taking photos in Alaska and that I had to go to Juneau. And so he told me the company that I had worked for, and I applied, and they happened to be kind of shorthanded, and so within the week they called me up to Alaska, and I began my journey over the course of the summer. We photographed whales and went out and did a lot of photography around Juneau, and I had started hatching this plan over the course of the summer. It was my first time in Alaska, and it had been really exciting in Juneau, but Juneau, like many towns, is fairly isolated in how easy it is to get places beyond Juneau. And so I had this plan that I really missed being attached by roads, so I was going to have a road trip through the rest of Alaska, and I planned out to go see pretty much anywhere that there was a road that was not closed. I was going to go for most of the fall. Fall is not the greatest time to go drive around Alaska. And I had told this to one of my friends who was working at a hunting camp outside of Kodiak. And he said, this is a great idea. I'll meet you in Anchorage, and then from there we're going to go and we're going to drive back to Montana, and we'll just have a long extended road trip through the whole fall and the winter, and we're going to ski and run and snowshoe and whatever else we can get into. So I felt that this was perfect. It gave me a month to go do my own thing, to go explore Alaska, and then we would go have another month together to go make our way back down to Montana. And from Juneau, it's very different than the rest of the state, up north at least, And here, mostly we travel by water and by air. You get around, you take a boat somewhere. And so the first leg of the journey was naturally the Alaska Marine Highway up to Haines. And I arrived in Haines, and I had a great time. I climbed my way through a whole bunch of mountains along the Kluane National Park there, making my way up to Anchorage, where I met up with a friend of mine who we hung around, had a bunch of fun, did a bunch of climbing, ice climbing and rock climbing and some running in Anchorage. And then she said, I have this cabin down in Seward. I got to leave, but you're welcome to have this cabin. And so I took her up on it and made my way down to Seward and climbed my way through, went through Hatcher Pass and came down through Fairbanks and around. And actually, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. First, I went up to Fairbanks before I took her up on the cabin, and I went up. And at this time, the government had just shut down. This was during the government shutdown, and since everything closed up, my big plan had been to go to Denali and to ski in and do a little bit of mountaineering there, not with anybody's knowledge really of where I was going. And I got to Denali and saw that the park was closed, and I hadn't been in contact with really anybody for quite some time, and so I had no idea that the government had shut down until I arrived at Denali and saw the sign on the gate that said not only was the park closed, it's also closed because there is no government, right now, and so therefore all services are shut down. And I thought for a minute, and I said, well, the park might be closed, but I don't need any services. I haven't been using any services, and so I'll just ski in, and I'll go do what I was going to do anyway, but it'll be a much longer road to get to what I had initially planned on doing. And so I took off, parked my car at this kind of like gravel lot that I had found nearby. They had just gotten like a fresh 2 feet of snow, and I took off and skied into the park and had a great time, spent a couple of days there and went around, and then I came back to my car and took off for the rest of my trip, going down the peninsula to Seward. And I get into Seward, and it's raining as it does in Seward, as we're familiar with here, and it's pouring, and the government is still shut down. And so each day I had really wanted to do some climbing in I'm losing the name of the park now, the Kenai Fjords National Park there. And I go up to the gate, and it's closed. Only this time, every time that I go to this gate and think that I'll just bike into the park and I'll go do what I wanted to do anyway, which it seemed like a lot of other people had been doing, but for some reason, every time I showed up there was the federal marshal would show up shortly after me at the gate. And whether they were on the same road and had just watched me drive up and was waiting for what I was doing, I'm not sure, but each time I went there, I thought, okay, well, luckily there's a trail here and there's a trail there, and I'll just do my own thing outside of the park. So I eventually, the first day that the government comes back in, they open up the park, and I jump on the opportunity. I've been waiting. I've been doing interviews for all sorts of other jobs. I was hoping to go back to Antarctica, and I also had an option to go to Park City to shoot other photography in other places, and so I was doing all these interviews from a cabin in the woods without any internet and trying to make these connections for what I was going to do next. So that morning I just finished an interview for a job in Park City, and I was really excited, and then I heard that the government opened. I thought this couldn't have been a better morning. And so I take off, and I toss all my ice climbing gear in a pack, and I toss everything in, and I get there, and Kenai Fjords National Park is relatively similar to the Mendenhall Recreation Area here, in that there's really just, you have to get to the other side of the park to really see all the other glaciers that are there. And so you have the one glacier that you get into. You have Exit Glacier that you can walk up to. And there's a trail that goes up the side, and you can take it up to the ice field, and it's, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 miles, but it's pretty much straight up. You go from sea level up to the ice field. And so I tossed all the gear in my pack, and I took up off this trail, and I get up to the top, and it was kind of calm, but as soon as I get to the top, it starts just blowing in, just super windy. Really, just as I got onto the ice field, it starts just coming in like sheets and pulses and waves of and up on an ice field, it's not like when you get wind down below, you're just getting sideways rain. Up there, it's like you're getting sandpaper blasted in your face, and it's not a great experience, but was so excited that the park had opened that I was going to go press through anyway. And so I get up, and just as I'm getting out a little ways on the ice sheet, I kind of hunker down behind this bluff of ice and pull out some snacks, and I go to pull out some water, and as I get deeper in my pack, I realize that there's not only no water left in the bladder that I was carrying with me, but it also has now soaked everything on the inside of my pack. And the temperature up on the ice field is quickly going below freezing and getting colder, and so I'm worried that I'm going to have this brick of a backpack really soon that used to be water. And so I decide that I'm going to have to turn around, and I turn around and start heading back down as fast as I can. And as I start to get down, it starts to clear up a little bit, still pretty windy up high. But down as I start to get closer to the bottom, I'm looking over at the glacier, and I see this huge opening, like a big waterfall coming out of the side of the glacier, and a beautiful blue Mulan. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Mulans, but it's basically the veins of the glacier. It's where water passes through the ice, like in Ice Age when they jump through the tube and they're going Mulans actually look relatively similar without all the fossils and everything that they find in there. But you have this crazy blue scene that you can get into, and if you have, if you can rappel into it or climb into it, you can go down into these depths of the glacier, into these amazing caves. And so I don't typically get up in front of the camera, and so my real thing that gets me into trouble is that once I have a camera, I will do some very, very stupid things. I will do just about anything for a photo. And so I end up in very difficult situations before I realize that I'm in those difficult situations. And I walk over to the edge of the cliff on the side of the glacier, and I realize, well, I don't have a rope, so I'm not going to be able to get to the side. So I'm going to have to hike back all the way back down around and come back up the glacier to this point. And so I go back down and go back down to the edge of the glacier, and I get to the water, and I realize that First, I'm going to have to climb across the side of this cliff that I saw because the water is too high and I can't ford it, and I don't really feel much like swimming, although I'm already pretty soaked at this point. And so I climb across the side, I get up to the base of the glacier, I toss down my pack, and somehow I guess I felt like I still felt the hurry from the lack of water that I had and the lack of having worried about a freezing backpack, but it didn't seem that, putting on my mountaineering boots would be the smart choice. Instead, I would just take my crampons and put them over my extra toughs. And the reason you wear mountaineering boots is because it keeps your ankle from going sideways, and extra toughs, as wonderful as they are, don't do that. And so I start climbing up, I take my ice axe and my cameras, and I'm getting up, and I get just about to the Mulan, and I just take a step back to kind of appreciate where I'm at and what I've gotten myself into. And it would have been better if I would have just kept going forward, because at that point I took a side step. And in ice climbing and mountaineering, it's the worst thing you can do in a set of crampons, because you lose your plane of being able to stay level. When you can toe in, you can keep your feet parallel to the ground. But as soon as you're sideways, it's very hard to keep your plane level and to dig in enough. And so with that one step, I suddenly was shooting off down the glacier that I had just walked up. And instead of sliding back down the way I came, which would have been nice, I started sliding off the side of the glacier. And since this glacier comes down to a very narrow canyon, it forms a lot of pressure ridges on the side, and it has a big cliff on the side. And so for the first part of my fall, I was kind of on this rounded slope with a hope of arresting myself. And so I took my ice axe and tried to jam it into the ice. And instead of sticking into the ice, it just pushed me off the ice. And I did this about 2 or 3 times, and on the last time I hit it, and the ice axe stuck just enough to make me feel like I had it, and when I went to hold it, I slipped and I lost the grip on the ice axe, and just after that, I went over the edge and took about a 30-foot fall down into the pressure ridges that were coming back. And as that ice moves down, as it's coming downhill, it starts to press up against this rock, and it will carve out the rock slowly. But those pressure ridges also start to fold over because the ice kind of goes up over the cliff and then comes back onto the ice. And so you end up with like this wonderful folded steel effect of ice that has very sharp edges and also melts into these Mulan pools, which would eventually become the Mulans that I was trying to photograph. And as I fell, I don't remember the actual drop, but when I hit my side, I could hear voices all of a sudden. And I realized that there was a viewing platform down about a half mile that people had actually seen this happen, what I had just gone through. And I heard yelling, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I remember sitting up, and my first thought was that I broke all my ribs on my left side. And so I start feeling for ribs, and I start thinking about a concussion and going through everything, trying to figure out what has just happened. And I realized that people were saying, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" And I remember sitting up and trying to shout back to them. It's nothing hurt but my pride. It was all I could think to say at that point, thinking that I was quite all right, all things considered. And so I go and I have to feel my way. I get through the Mulan pools, and my camera has fallen in one, and my ice axe is in another, and I make my way through. And as I stand up, I realize that if I had arrested that second later before I had lost my ice axe, I would have launched myself far enough over this lip that was a blunt edge into all the sharp edges that were beyond. And consider myself extremely lucky, and also that I'm in a lot of pain and I need to get out of this place because these people who can see me can't actually do anything for me. And I start walking out. I climb back out over the glacier, climb back out across the rock, and get back into my car. And some of these people get back to the parking lot in time and see me, and I just wave to them as though like nothing has happened. And on my right side, I look perfectly normal, but the problem is that same sandpaper type texture when you're falling on a glacier is getting blown by a glacier, rips everything. And I'm completely bloody all the way down my left side. My clothes are just in tatters all the way down to my shoes. And I go back to the cabin. And the first thing I think is I'm dehydrated. I have to drink some water. I need to drink something. And so I take 2 glasses of water real quick and immediately have to go to the bathroom. And I go outside and instead of urine coming out, which I was hoping to find, it is deep purple blood, just straight, the darkest, I've ever seen. And so I quick get in the car, and I go over to the hospital and to Seward, and I walk to what I think is the front door in the emergency, and I walk up, and right at this point, the shock starts to wear off. And I start to kind of collapse against the door, and I'm knocking on the window, and I'm just looking up and realizing that everything inside is dark. There's nobody in this side of the hospital. And so I luckily had enough sense to be like, well, okay, maybe I went to the wrong door. So I hobble around the side of the building and past the brick. And it's like this flickering light, and there's like the woods are right here, and it's this old brick, and I'm walking along kind of like hobbling, leaning against, probably leaving blood along the side of their hospital. And I'm thinking like this is like the beginning of a zombie movie, like some like bloody guy like hobbling up into the hospital. And I get around, and I finally get into the hospital, and I walk in the front door, and I fold over the front desk, and there's nobody at the front desk. And there's like this group of people over here that I don't know what they're doing, but they're talking over here. And this guy I hear start walking behind me, but clearly like walking to another point. You know how like people have like that determined walk, and he's like clearly not coming to the desk. He's actually supposed to go somewhere else. And he is walking by, he says, "Hey, can I help you?" And my first thought is, to me this felt like forever because I'm in a lot of pain. It probably was like a couple of seconds. And I just remember, no, I'm just resting here. And being frustrated with where everything has gone. And he And he walks over, and he's passing by me, and as he gets to my left-hand side, he sees, like, all the blood and ripped up clothes and everything. He says, "Oh, what happened to you?" A little bit more earnestly this time. And so I took a 30-foot fall, and, and I could use some help. And he said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll get you right in. We'll get you taken care of." And he puts me into the hospital room and gets me all set up. And a little bit while later, there were all these tests. They try to figure out what's going on. And they, it's a small hospital in Alaska. They don't really have anything really except personnel there. And this doctor comes in, and he starts putting on the ultrasound and going over. And he goes over, and he's like, "Okay, well, your kidney looks good. Your spleen doesn't look quite in the right place, but I think it's all right." And then he just goes globs and globs and globs, keeps putting more jelly on. And then finally he says, and there's a black hole here, and that's not good. Thanks. I realized something was wrong. And so they start pumping me full of morphine, in a lot of pain. Doesn't matter. I don't respond to morphine, apparently. And so he finally, calls in the helicopter. It's bad weather. They finally get a helicopter in and fly me out to Anchorage, where I spent the next week among friends, getting better. And when I went back to Montana, I decided that I had to make it back to Alaska because I was hoping it would give me a second chance.
Wow. Thank you for that story, Eric. I got to say, I legitimately thought that story was going to end with, "and then I died." I would not have been surprised. Kodiak, do you have a story ready for us?
We do. We would like to welcome Jake Jacobson up with a hunting camp tale.
And you can ask if they can see you. You can ask if they can see you.
Is this about right for you guys?
Yeah, that's great. Just speak up, that's all.
Well, I'll keep it short. This happened in 1982. I've been in the hunting business since 1967. In the course of 49 years, you see some funny things and things you'd never imagined might come your way. In 82, I had 3 hunters in the Seattle area. I'd taken them up to the lodge north of Kotzebue one at a time in the Super Cup. And I noticed that one guy, he'd been with me before. I knew him quite well. He was a contractor, a construction company owner from Seattle. And he brought one of his superintendents with him, and then some other younger fellow, well, younger by 2 or 3 years or so. Anyway, I noticed that the guy knew, and his superintendent, Lance, kind of were standoffish with the other guy, and I couldn't figure out why. One day, after about a week up at the camp, I was down south of the camp looking for game with Lance, and I said, "Hey, what is it with you and Al and Jim there? It seemed to be kind of, you keep your distance from him all the time." So, "Well, you didn't hear what happened in Anchorage?" I said, "No, tell me." Well, they came from Seattle to Kotzebue, and they had to overnight in Anchorage. They got to their hotel room, and Jim asked them what they knew about the Great Alaska Bush Company. I said, "Yeah, they'd heard of it." He said, "Let's go." And Lance said, "I don't know. I don't go to those kind of places." Well, Jim, the young guy, he wanted to go. So the elder one, Al, he said, "Yeah, we'll take the kid." So they went. They're enjoying the performances there. And after a while, Jim became enamored with one of the performers who hadn't yet had her turn on the stage. They took her to a booth over in the shady part of the room and began buying ponies of champagne, and they became pretty close over there in the shadow. After a short time, Jim came over. Now, this is what Lance is telling me. Jim came over and said, "Hey, you see that sweet young thing? I'm going to take her home for the evening. I'll see you at the airplane in the morning." Well, they were kind of disgusted. I mean, they knew Jim and his family and so forth, and were just put off by this. Said, "All right, don't be late for the airplane." So off he went. They hadn't left the building by more than a few minutes. One of the other performers came by and said, "Hey, what's with your buddy? Is he like guys or what?" What do you mean?" "Well, he left with a female impersonator." So in the morning, they're sitting at the airport, and along comes Jim. Al says, "How was your date?" "Oh, him to know that he'd been hoodwinked like that. So he just let on like everything was fine. These guys didn't want anything to do with him. So up at the cabin there, on the 15th, we had about 15 inches of dry powder snow. There was no game movement, and hard for us to get around too. So my wife said, look, I'll put the turkey in the oven. Why don't you fire up the sauna? We've got a half-barrel stove in the sauna. It's located in the back of the shop. It's a little 6 by 12 foot well-insulated room in the shop. And we disrobe out in the shop and hang our clothes on a nail. And then on top of the stove is a flat top there, and I put old 5-gallon gas cans. They got flat bottoms on them. They heat up pretty quick, and I fill those with water. You can sweat up good in the sauna, then go outside, soap up, and shampoo up, and rinse off the water out of the hot cans. So I got the sauna prepared and came in and told the wife, I said, everything's ready. So she went out and had her sauna. Came back in and said, all right, boys, it's still hot out there. You better go while it's ready. So right away, Jim, he grabbed his towel, changed his shorts, and went out there to do the sauna. And Lance said, I ain't getting in there with that son of a bitch. And Al said, hey, well, it's okay, you can wear your shorts. No. I said, I ain't getting in there naked with that guy. I said, look, there's 3 of us. If he decides he's attracted to you, he can't overpower you. We'll protect him. Besides, he's big enough for 4 people. We don't get to touch each other or nothing in there. Nah, he's not going to go. So Al, he went down to take the sauna. And I said, Lance, you really out of consideration for everybody. I mean, you smell pretty ripe from clear across the room. Come on, let's go and get a sauna, and we'll all have relief from that. So as we entered the shop, Bruce was just slipping out of his beige-colored men's bikini underwear. And my wife had left a beige-colored bra hanging on the nail. Well, Lance saw that. That's it! So we all suffered for another week because Lance never would take us on.
All right, thank you very much for that, Jacob. Valdez, have any story ideas been knocked loose for you?
Oh, yes, we have a story.
All right,
we've
great.
lost.
Thank you.
We're not there, though.
Well, let's see. Are you going to stand over there, or where do you want to stand?
I'll sit by you.
I'll adjust this from. I think they can see.
That works for us.
Does that work? Okay.
So the 2 ladies from Juneau that were coming over to see Judy Collins made me think of this story. Several of us in this room are on the Valdez Arts Council, and we brought that show here, but that's not my story. My story is about another group that came that very same year. A group of musicians were coming to Valdez to do a show, went to the airport to pick them up the night before, and they all arrived, really nice folks, except for their keyboard player, they told me, was coming, excuse me, the next morning on a flight. Fine. So I show up at the airport the morning of the show, no keyboard player. This is a very short story, by the way. Turns out he was in Anchorage that morning, headed out for his flight, took a look at the teeny little plane, changed his mind, decided he would rent a car and drive to Valdez. So he took out his trusty little smartphone to see how to get from Anchorage to Valdez, and he followed the directions. He arrived in Valdez just before showtime because he drove from Anchorage to Whittier thinking he was going to take a nice scenic coastal route on the Alaska Marine Highway, had to drive back to Anchorage to Valdez, just made it. Anyway, that's my story.
Okay, well, you can kind of understand. I mean, it didn't work out well for Ricky Valens and some of that group. So musicians flying doesn't always go together real well. Kenai, we got a story for us.
Yes. We have one short story over here.
Okay.
All right, my name's Evelyn Clough. This is a fishing story, but it's a little lighter than what some of these
story's been kind of heavy. This is just a Kenai River story, okay? A few years back, my dad and I owned a little 14-foot sled with a 25-horse Honda on it, a little sweet little boat for 3 of us to ride in, and we, neither one of us could pilot it by ourselves, so I had a friend that was our boat pilot, and he weighed about 300 pounds, about 6 feet tall, so I had to learn how to balance the boat when he moved around so I didn't fall out. But so we'd launch at Centennial Park and go down river a little ways and back troll with that sweet little Honda. And so the sun's shining and it's a beautiful Alaska day, and there's an eagle sitting in the top of a tree watching us, and we're fishing. I'm pretty sure we were using bait, and we weren't fishing for rainbows, but you know those darn rainbows, they don't seem to know you're not fishing for them. So Mike was sitting in the stern facing me, and I think he was eating a sandwich, and I was facing downriver, sitting in the bow chair, and so I saw this eagle sitting in this tree watching me, and all of a sudden a fish hit. And so I start reeling, and that eagle's watching, and pretty soon the eagle takes off and comes around the stern of the boat, and I'm reeling just as fast as I can because, you know, the Kenai's pretty swift, and it was a rainbow, probably about a 14-inch or so. It wasn't a huge rainbow. And I'm reeling as fast as I can and hoping that I can get that fish in. Well, that darn eagle, he swooped down and he grabbed my fish. Well, Mike was looking at me. He wasn't looking at the fish, so he didn't even realize what was going on. And the eagle grabs his fish, and just before he grabbed it, I realized that he was going to take it, and I couldn't even speak. I got buck fever, and I'm standing there reeling as fast as I can. I go, ooh, 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 ooh. I just pointing and going, ooh, ooh, ooh. And Mike couldn't understand what the heck was wrong with me. He finally looked, and by that time the eagle had swooped down, grabbed that darn that rainbow in his talons, and had flown off straight sideways across the river. And I put my thumb on the reel. It was a level line, and so when the line got tight enough, the eagle dropped the fish, and it plopped down into the water. And of course, the current just immediately carried it downriver. But that line was pretty far up by then. Man, I'm just reeling as fast as I can to get it in because I could see that damned eagle circle around behind me and back around again. I mean, he wasn't going to give up too easy. And so he circled back around again, and I'm just reeling as fast as I can. And he swooped down again, and he grabbed at it, but he dropped it right away. But that was my fish story. So I get the darn fish in, and rainbow season was not open at the moment. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this darn fish? Well, it had about 8 claw marks in it where the talons grabbed it. The darn thing wasn't going to live. I couldn't bear to throw it in the river, so I just tossed it in the bottom of the boat. And so I can't remember whether we got kings or whatever we were fishing for that day. This was a few years ago before everything shut down. And so then we get back to Centennial Park. Who pulls in right after us but the game warden's boat? And it's a female game warden. She's the one that had checked that boat a couple of years before when I needed somebody to, sign it off. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So I had wrapped it in a towel and where it wasn't in sight, and we pulled the boat out. And I'm looking at the darn fish is laying there on the bottom of the boat. So I reached over and wrapped it up again, and because she's walking all around there, Or if she would have asked me if I had a fish, I wasn't going to lie about it, but I didn't know what the fine was or whatever. But anyway, that eagle really wanted my fish and made 2 tries for it, but I won the battle with the eagle, and I didn't get a ticket either.
Well, thank you so much.
Only Alaskans can catch an eagle with a worm. I think that's pretty impressive. Okay, well, for our final storyteller tonight, Fairbanks will close it up, and we have Steve Minima telling our final story for this evening.
Hi, I'm Steve, and I don't know what I'm going to call the story. You can name it after I'm done. It's a hunting story about my son and I. I don't know, it's probably 15 years ago or so. We lived in Fort Yukon, and beginning of September, and the caribou were going to start running at the border. So we took off in a small 16-foot riverboat, small outboard, filled with gas, and took off slowly. And we'd go burn 15, cash 15, burn 15, cash 15, all the way up. And a beautiful river, clear, you can see the bottom. And we pulled up, we were close to the Canadian border. Matter of fact, we went to the border and just came back a little bit. And we set up camp, just a pole and a blue tarp. And soon we started harvesting caribou. They would come over the ridge across the river, and you could see them line up, and then they'd come to the beach, and we'd wave, and they'd come across the river to us, and we'd take them. And started putting them on the meat pole, and more people came from Fort Yukon and joined us in camp, and more caribou joined. And one guy came up, and I looked in his boat, and he just had a 6-gallon can in his boat, and I'm like, how in the heck did you get here with 6 gallons? And he said, Indian secret. I just laughed about it, and I didn't think anything of it. So we kept going, and some natives came down from Old Crow, and my boy was only 9 years old at the time, and he had an ancient 30-30 in the boat, and he says, come on, Isaac, you can be my shooter. So Isaac joined him in the boat, and they would drive along the beach, and he'd shoot caribou out of the boat, and everybody would cheer and watch him as he went, and we just kept going, and we had we had probably 30 caribou hanging, and we'd sleep at night, and the only light we had was the fire, the campfire. We didn't think to bring any lights along because it had been light all summer, and just was getting to the point where it would get dark at night. And you could see the bear shadows come along the beach at night, but you could never see them, and they never bothered us, but they were only like 25 feet away, and you could hear them. And when the caribou would shoot the caribou, we'd throw all the guts and stuff in the river, and we thought, well, it was just washing down river. You didn't see any because you'd walk them down the bank, and you didn't see it. Figured it was going, taking off. Anyway, it was a wonderful trip. We were there, and all we were eating was caribou. And we had a big cast iron skillet, boiling caribou, salt and caribou. Until we just couldn't shoot anymore. So we filled up our boats till just full. You couldn't take nothing else. And we started downriver, and then right around the bend from where we were hunting, there's this bear, about 8.5-foot grizzly standing there. We drifted by about 20 feet, and you're like, man, he's been walking by every night, for like a week or whatever we were there. And so we start going down the river, and then I go to my gas cache, the first one is gone. I'm like, I know what an Indian secret is. You look where every guy's cached their gas. He took my gas all the way down, so I ended up drifting about halfway down the fort on the way back. So anyway, little story. It's memorable for me.
All right, well, thanks so much for everyone for being involved tonight. Again, a real quick thank you to Artem. I'm glad he's not here right now. Zdanov, it's Russian, I don't know how to pronounce that. Shane Southwick, Melissa Harder, Chris Skidmore, Katie Baxter, Molly Good, Mary Jo Joyner, Rihanna Thurman, Robert Barr, Beth Weigel, Alita Buss. Thanks to all of you for coming, and especially thanks to our storytellers. And if you'd like to do this again, just get in touch with me. Maybe we can put another event together like this. But thanks, everyone, for making this historical night for Alaska and sharing all your great stories.